get started on time. Nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. Tonight is a big night. We have important special guests coming to share information with you. And of course, we are getting to work starting to build some important plans for our district's future. So I just want to say hello to everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. I know y'all have been doing lots of studying getting to this point, so I think it'll be a great night. I'm going to hand it over to Lizzie.
All right, thank you. Okay, so, good evening. It's so great to be here. I feel like I've just been on a hamster wheel of running the past couple of weeks, and it's awesome because I've been in so many communities and seeing so many amazing things that are coming together for kids. No different here. And I want to kind of talk about that because I know sometimes when we see these numbers attached to these projects, it's a bit overwhelming. If y'all go back to meeting 1, and if you recorded what I said there, I think I told you that in meeting 1, that get ready, because when we get to meeting 4 and you start seeing these numbers, it's a lot to take in. I don't want y'all to feel like that's any different from any other community that's up against a bond initiative right now. It's very normal. This has nothing to do particular with Dripping Springs. We're in 7 districts right now this cycle, and every one of my facilitators who's working in those districts has said the same thing. The costs are making people take a breath. And that's just the way it is right now. Unfortunately, the cost of not just construction materials, but of land and of labor is astronomical. And so we're all dealing with that. And so I say that because I don't want you to feel like it's just numbers that you're seeing for your district. This is nationwide, and this is an epidemic. And it started after COVID, and it hasn't stopped. And we've had some months where it's leveled a little, but then it starts ticking back up. We were in a point where we were almost seeing 20% escalation like every 3 months. That's how crazy it was. Now that's tamed a little bit since. But I just want to put that out there because I don't want you to feel like this is only happening to this committee. It's statewide and probably nationwide in other districts that are coming up against a bond initiative. Okay, so I got that out. I just wanted to say it because I wanted y'all to hear Lizzie say it because we do this all over the state and I see it everywhere. So tonight, I think we're really starting in with the final point here on your charge, and that's representing the priorities, expectations, and values of the entire community. So as you start putting together this package, tonight's just a dress rehearsal. Remember, we have 1 more full meeting after this. This is just a rehearsal. You worked at home on your worksheet, you brought it in, you're going to talk about it at your table, and then we're going to have a whole nother meeting in a few weeks. But I really think as you start crafting this, and I know y'all are very in tune to your community, that you have to think, what is our community going to accept when we start putting a bond package out there to them? And so that's the mindset you have to also get into tonight. Not just we're building a bond that's going to be amazing for our students, but what can we actually get across the finish line in those terms, okay? All right, y'all know this. I've heard from so many of y'all, and I love it. It makes me so happy because it makes me really think that you're working and you're digging into the work. So tonight, we are going to have a little review of some prior material that Elaine's going to go over. And Dan Wedmiller is here, and he is your financial advisor for the district. Just like you have a demographer, you also have a financial advisor. And he is going to present your capacity and some of those items, and Elaine's going to also help with those items tonight. And this will be your last outside presenter. And then after all of that presentation, we'll do our table talk and our Q&A, and then we are going to start building our bond at our table with our worksheets. And we have new worksheets for you. So if you didn't get to print the updated one, we've got a fresh, brand new copy. And it even has a column for everyone, so if you want to keep track of all of your friends at the table and how the vote turns out tonight at your table, you can do that. Remember, nobody's going to take your worksheet. It's your worksheet, you get to take it home and bring it back to meeting 6, and nobody's going to take it then either. That's your property, okay? Awesome. Y'all know all of this. Restrooms are outside. And the one thing I really hope we can adhere to tonight is letting our presenters get through the presentation. There's a lot of information, and financial information can be a little heavy, so we want to let them get through everything before we do our Q&A time. So make sure you're taking notes. Everything you need is there in your slides so that you can review it while it's being presented to you. So here we are already, meeting 5. It's a whirlwind, right? Went by so fast. And so, like I said, we will have one more meeting to finalize the package. And that night, we will also do a SWOT analysis. And we will talk about the strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities and the threats of this package. And that's something that will assist the district as they move forward and are doing the presentations and presenting all of this stuff to the Board of Trustees. Well, we're gonna get in that groan zone tonight. So I've shown you this slide a lot, and guess what? It's happening tonight, okay? I can promise you. You sat at this table with your friends all of these times. Y'all are comfortable with each other, and you should be, and you should groan, and you should have open conversations with each other. That's what we want. Please note that during the vote tonight, the practice vote, we will be circulating. This is a time where a lot of questions come up, so we're going to be helping y'all and talking and coming around and answering questions and being available, okay? And tonight, the goal is to start funneling toward consensus. All right, so this time, I'm going to turn it over to Elaine.
All right, good evening, everybody. Trying to juggle my notes and the clicker and the microphone. I need a table right here. So tonight we were talking about bond capacity. We're still doing that, but I want to take a step back based on some conversations I'm hearing and update some information for you. So this is a recap of all the numbers that we looked at last time. And remember, what did I say? You're going to see some really big numbers, right? I warned you. I don't like these numbers. Can I be honest with you? I hate these numbers. They're big. It makes my job extremely difficult, but it is what we're dealing with today. I tried to categorize all of the projects that we looked at last time by category, and so you can see the majority of the projects that we presented last meeting are new campuses. Now remember, these are projects through the year 2030. New campuses that are projected to be needed to accommodate growth, facility improvements to our existing based on what we know today and the life of our equipment, and then the replacement schedules for all of our departments. So in total tonight, we're at $825 million and some change. I did change number to retrofit seatbelts. If you recall last meeting, I had a flat $1 million in there. We were waiting on the labor cost. So that's been updated. It was updated on your Excel sheet that went out last week, and I'm sorry that that took me so long to get done. So tonight we're at $825 million. I had this big dream that we were gonna come and we're gonna be able to knock everything for the next 5 years out. You're gonna hear later tonight that's probably not gonna happen. Therefore, you're charged with a very difficult task of prioritizing everything. And it's gonna be hard. I wanna update, so I told you we received updated pricing on the seat belts. I do have some numbers here. We have 39 buses that would be retrofitted. And if you'll give me a minute to flip through my notes. That aren't here. So we'll come back to this when you're in your table groups, but we have a breakdown of how many of those buses would be replaced in the next 5 years or longer, but there's 39 total buses to be retrofitted. We would not do that work in-house, so we would need to hire people to do that. Then there was a request to split out the high school renovation cost, more than just one number. So you saw that on your worksheet. And I'm going to turn it over to James to talk about how that was split out and why it was split out that way. I don't have the map in there.
We split the high school into 5 different categories to kind of break that thing up. I know it was a pretty big number. Basically, we have section 1, section 2, section 3, you have 5 sections, we got that. So J Hall is the last one, that's the last addition. We did have some minor work in it. So what we did is that school's been remodeled several times and been added onto it before it was a middle school. So we started that middle section of the school, then we went with athletics, and we went with that, the last part with that science was 3, and then the athletics or the fine arts was kind of 4. And I just broke those up into subcategories. So they range from anywhere from 120,000 square feet to, I think one's 60,000 square feet. We put dollar figures to those. They were also broken down by the age of the building, but they were also broken down by the HVAC in that part of the building. So we have some chilled water in there, we have some DX units in there, and we kind of broke them up. That's where those pockets make sense. So we did break that out so you guys can do part of that building. All of it needs to be done. If you think one's more important, we did put them in the order that we think is most important. So building work orders, section 1 was the oldest part of that building. That's the one we put section 1, and then you can go from there. So section 5 would be our least if you wanted to break that job up.
All right, on the buses, we have 31 that have a remaining life of 5 to 8 years, and we have 8 that would be a replacement in 4 or less years. So does that help on that? So the majority of those buses will be in place for at least 5 years. All right, then we talked about the timing of new campuses and when we would need to go to bond based on the construction schedule for opening those campuses by the target date. So I looked at what are our options for bonding just the new campuses. So one option, of course, is going in the year needed in order to meet that construction deadline. So that looks like 4 consecutive years of bonds, including just 1 new campus each cycle. Second option is we do 2 elections, one in May of 25, and you would have the high school number 2 and elementary number 7. Because remember, elementary number 7 has to bond by May of 26, and then middle school 3 and elementary 8 are pushed off until May of 27. And then another option is a bond in May of 25 with just the high school as far as new campuses, then May of 26 for elementary 7, and then May of 27 with the remaining 2 campuses. So just to kind of give you some ideas as you work in your tables, these are some options for the new campuses. All right, we're going to pause here and talk about high school 2 design because there's been a lot that happened that maybe this committee doesn't really know about or is aware of. And so I want to talk about the steps we've gone to get to the number that we're bringing you, that we've brought you in this committee. So in planning the high school, back in 22, we issued a bid for architects. And from those 30 submittals, we chose 3, PBK, Pfluger, and VLK. We had not assigned the high school project to any architect. So last summer, we went on a road tour. Actually, it was the summer of 23. Seems like this summer. We toured all over Texas and looked at high schools that these 3 firms have built. We were looking at their design. We looked at old, we looked at new. How well are the old holding up? What kind of materials were used? How did we feel about that school? From that, we recommended and the board approved VLK as the architect in September of 23. After that, we held 4 community input meetings. That's where we asked the community to come in, tell us your hopes, your dreams, what do you want to see in this building? That information then was turned over to what VLK calls launch. That's their launch process, it's their charrette. And it was in this room with this many people, if not more, and each table worked on a design for high school number 2. There were students, there were teachers, there were staff, there was community members. That overall concept of a building is where we're at today with a courtyard. That was the big want from that launch committee. Launch committee broke into a project advisory team called PAT. That team is going to follow the design and the construction of this building from day one. And so they meet as we have design updates, and they will continue to meet until this campus is completed. In June of this year, the board awarded the contract to American Constructors to build this school. Why would we hire the contractor now? Because we use CMAR, and they sit with the architects and say, no, that design is more expensive. Use this material. They're the ones building schools. They know better than the architect what the market is doing. They know where the design is expensive, and so they are working alongside VLK to say, this is more expensive, or this is a better choice, etc., along with our team. So in between June and September, the administration team started looking at the plans and said, oh, we don't want this, we don't want that. We saved about $10 million before we took schematic to the board for approval. Pat was updated on that and will continue to be updated on that. In September of this year, we went to the high school and sat with teachers, coaches, administrators, librarians, counselors. Look at this design. Does it fit your needs? The architects are making changes based on that. We want to make sure that the building we occupy works, right? And so there have been changes from that. Schematic, the board approved back in October. I say back in October, that was just last month, huh? Feels like a long time ago. And so this is where we are today. Your charge is to determine if you're going to put this in a May of 25 bond. And this is what's really driving the need for us to be here tonight. So again, the project advisory team continues to meet through this process. Design development is scheduled to go to the board in January, just a couple of months, and that's a more definitive design. So schematic is just kind of the overall footprint. What does this site look like? Design is more in the details. What are the rooms? Where are the rooms? How big are the rooms? Then our plan is to get construction documents to the board middle of next year. Bond in May, and then the CMAR is going to give us a guaranteed maximum price. What that means is based on the design of this school and the market, they're going to say, Dripping Springs ISD, I can build this school for X amount, and I'm going to eat it if it's over unless you make change orders. So that guaranteed price is what they're going to build it for, and if there are savings, we get those back. So we have a construction anticipated start date of October 25. Obviously, that will not happen if this is not in a bond and is not approved. But anticipated construction date of October 25 so that we can open in August of 28. So that's how we've gotten here, okay? There's been a bunch of people in this design process. It's not just a few of us up here at Central Administration doing this, a lot of community involvement. So we had a workshop with the board about high school 2, and we showed them this is the estimate at schematic from the company that's going to build this campus. At schematic design, they estimated construction cost only at just under $256 million. Here is the breakdown. You can see the largest cost is the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. There are a ton of faucets and toilets in this campus. Remember, it's going to serve 2,500 kids. There's athletic facilities on this campus. So mechanical, plumbing, and electrical is your largest cost. And then you can see everything else. And there's a lot of stuff grouped into these to try to get some overall categories. But this is how we got to 255 million. And then you can look back in last meeting's materials, and we have all the soft costs and everything else to get to the 292 that we're proposing. What is a soft cost? I get this a lot. What is in soft cost? So there's a lot of things that go into soft cost. You've got your professional services, architect, engineers. Of course, the architect fee, we've already got through construction documents in the 23 bond. After construction, the architect monitors that. There's an additional fee that's not in the 23 bond. FF&E, this is huge. This campus is big. There's a lot of programs in this campus. And so the FF&E, I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like. The technology, permits, fees, utilities. Permits are very expensive, I have come to learn in Dripping Springs ISD, or in the city of Dripping Springs in the ETJ. And then contingency. You want to have some contingency on a project this large. Okay, imagine a campus that's going to serve 2,500 students. Why is FF&E so large? Here are some examples. So we're furniture for 70 classrooms, the administration, cafeteria tables, the library. So there's furniture throughout this building. When you look at a science lab, all kinds of materials that go in there. The eye wash station, safety showers, fire extinguishers, band. We've got to have additional instruments, uniforms, the risers, the stands, and let me tell you, band instruments are not cheap. Our CTE programs, so welders, plasma cutters, 3D printers. If you've not been to the Fab Lab at the high school, it's amazing how much equipment they have in there. Athletics, we have 20 sports. Think about all of the balls and the mats and the weights and the helmets, all of those things. Fine arts, you see in this list, those curtains are expensive. The building, just the building set equipment for fine arts and all of the lights that go into that facility. Think about our kitchen. We've got to have pans, utensils, coolers, signage. And then there's all the other stuff, the nursing, the bookshelves, the soft seating, grounds equipment, custodial equipment. When you start breaking down all of the things that go in this building to make it function, you start to get an idea of how much. And I'll tell you, it gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about having to order all this. I have one purchasing person. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to James. Here are some of the reasons why construction in the Austin area is so crazy.
First of all, we're competing against about $6 billion worth of school construction, just in Austin, just in Central Texas. So you take Round Rock, Leander, Liberty Hill, us, Austin, everybody else, Round Rock, just passed almost $1 billion round. We're competing with those services. So that's obviously difficult. We're also dealing with all these guys up here. So some of you guys probably work for these companies. These are massive companies that are building this area. Tesla alone, when they started their gigafactory, sucked out the concrete. They were buying concrete from Del Valley and Round Rock, and they used all the concrete in those two areas. It was a chain effect. I felt it when I was working in Liberty Hill or in Real Leander, that we could truck our concrete in because it was going to Tesla. So things like that highly affect us. We're in a weird zone where Dripping Springs is. We're in between Austin, we're a little bit far for traffic. Those guys don't like to come this way. We're too far from San Antonio, so there's a premium to work here. And we're also competing against other school districts that are closer to that workforce. That affects us. But like you guys can see, if you guys have driven downtown lately, you've seen all the tower cranes. That's all the people we compete against in our market. We're in the commercial market. That's what we're competing against. So just let your eyes look, and you can kind of see what's driving our costs up. So this is a bid project comparison, Dripping Springs, Liberty Hill, and Del Valley. So these are projects that bid a couple years ago, but we actually inflated those with the actual inflation that you guys are seeing now. You can see our school's at $255 million. This is the construction cost only, it doesn't count soft cost. You look at construction, it was $255 in Liberty Hill. That was bid 2 years ago. So you take the cost, what it would be now, it would be $298 million. Del Valley bid at $230 million. That was bid a year and a half ago. You take that, we're at $269 million. So in comparisons to those schools we're bid today, we're actually less. We built this school that we designed, that we're bidding out right now, is pretty efficient, especially in our area. We're competing against everybody we're competing against. We're actually, you can see the numbers are actually better. So we're building a very efficient school. This is not Taj Mahal. It's a good school. It's a quality school. Geothermal, it's got good energy savings built into it. It's a safe school, but it's a very economical school. You guys can see right there, and this is our direct competition. This is an unbid project comparison with Jordan Springs, Lake Travis, Georgetown, and Hayes. These are the numbers that our competitors are using for future projects coming up. So some of these haven't been bid, they're projection numbers. And you can see Lake Travis, Georgetown, and Hayes. You can see what their size is, and you can see what construction costs are. Some of these are in the middle of being bid or being bid right now. Obviously, we're not bidding, we have ours as a estimate, but our numbers are tracking at 255, so you can see our competition. The one in Lake Travis, you can see the square footage is a lot less than that. So that's the price comparison there, and they're early on design. They're over budget right now. They're trying to get it down to that cost because that's what the bonding capacity was. So that 201 number is kind of a hypothetical. Georgetown's tracking at 285 right now, and Hayes is tracking at 374 for what they're building. Those are ones that are fixing to be bid or their estimates early on. So again, in comparison, we're not building a Taj Mahal. It's a good school, it's a safe school, and it's economically balances out cheaper than all these are competition.
Okay, so I just want to give you some additional information from our prior meetings, and now we're going to go into my favorite thing, finance. Talk about bond capacity. So again, Dan Wegmiller is here with Specialized Public Finance. He's been the district's financial advisor for 30? Were you a kid when you started? All right, before I turn it over to him, I just want to cover some basics so you have an understanding about what we're talking about. So remember, bonds deal with the INS side of the tax rate. The tax collections from that portion of the tax rate can only be used to pay principal and interest on voter-approved bonds. I cannot use INS to actually build a school or supplement a construction. So in Texas, the system is set up. If you want to build a school or make major renovations, you're most likely going to have to issue debt and then levy a tax rate to pay that debt back. I don't know many school districts that have enough money on the operations side to just build a school. We don't get funded that way. The board is in charge with setting the INS tax rate at a level sufficient to pay the principal and interest on the bonds. Tax collections over here are not subject to recapture. So I had a question from last meeting. Why is that? That's the way that it's set up in Texas. I don't know why that is. I'm glad we don't pay recapture on this. There's really no limit that the state sets on the INS other than without extreme circumstances, you cannot have a tax rate above 50 cents. So we're at 35 cents. We're well below the 50-cent limit, and I've done a little bit of research. Most of the fast growth districts in the state that I'm aware of are at 50 cents. So it's pretty remarkable that we're at 35. If there are tax collections that are budgeted and exceed more than what you need to pay interest and principal, you have to use those to pay off debt, and so we do that through a defeasance or a refunding. And what that does is we pay off debt early, and so that saves us long-term on interest costs. Okay, so what exactly is bond capacity? We've been throwing that around, but do you really even know what that means? Bond capacity means how much additional debt, how many additional bonds can the district issue without exceeding that 50-cent cap. And every time we go to sell bonds, we have to submit information to the state attorney general, and they have to be assured that we can pay those back without going over 50 cents. So capacity is impacted by how much debt we currently have. Makes sense, right? And also a bunch of other things. So one of the big factors in determining capacity is property value growth. And I bet if I asked every one of you in here, what do you think our values are going to grow by for the next 5 years? You would all have a different answer. And how many of you would be absolutely confident that your answer is the correct one? Come on, I need some help in the business office. I'll hire you. Okay, so property values are a big impactor on capacity because that is our tax base. If our tax base grows, then that 35 cents doesn't have to be changed. It brings in more money, right? And you're going to see we've been able to keep 35 cents even through 2 elections. Changes to tax exemptions. So when the state starts tinkering with the way property taxes work, it impacts us usually on the INS more than it does on the M&O side. And the reason is, this last bullet point, state hold harmless. So when we mess with the tax rates for M&O, the state tries to keep school districts harmless for that, meaning that we don't see a reduction in our revenues. But on the INS side, they don't always give you hold harmless, or if they do, they only do it for a few years. So when they were talking about increasing the homestead exemption to $100,000, they said, we'll hold you harmless for any debt authorized by August or September of 23. So our 23 bond is held harmless, but what that means is the property values that we would collect taxes on for this bond will be reduced by the increased homestead exemption. So that impacts our values. So factors that increase bond capacity are increasing property values, paying down debt early, increasing the INS tax rate, that gives us more capacity, and you'll see that this evening, and lower interest rates. So the last year or so, rates were rising, and now the Fed has started to back down and has had 2 cuts so far this year. Now they're kind of saying, well, maybe we're done, the economy isn't really it's stronger than we thought. So this is another throwing a dart. What are interest rates going to do? But property value growth is the key factor and probably the most difficult to project. It's going to be impacted again by those additional exemptions and caps, adjustments to existing values. Are they going up or are they going down? And it's been very difficult to project here lately. Pace of new construction. So our demographer goes and talks to developers. Are you building houses? How soon are you developing houses? And then that drives our student growth numbers. So you're going to see I've used some of this data to get what I think is the most scientific method to project this. But is our commercial base growing? Is our retail base growing? Is our residential growing? We are 98% rooftops, so we don't have a big commercial base. So here's our tax rate history. You do have this in your handout, so it's easier to see, but back in 2005, we were at the state limit of $1.50. That was the highest any school district M&O tax rate could be. And then you can see what legislative change has done. So in 2007, the max you could have was $1.04. So all districts were at $1.04 or less. If they weren't at $1.50, they couldn't be at $1.04. They were a fraction below that. And then 2015, 2016, you see that line there? The $1.04 lasted for a really long time. There was no change to state aid funding for the tax rate purposes. But then that 15, 16 years when we went back into recapture. And I happened to be here, and I started looking at our M&O side, and I was like, oh, we are hosed. We're gonna lose so much money on recapture. We've got to do something. So working with the board, we did what is now called a VATRE, and we lowered the INS rate. You're gonna see that on the next slide, and we increased the M&O rate to the maximum of 117, and that helped us survive on the operations side. We stayed at $1.17, and then lo and behold, in 2019, the state came along and started changing school finance again and introduced what is called compression based on your property value growth. So you can see, because of the current state law, our tax rate is now 75.52 for operations. In this next slide, you can see where INS dropped in 15-16 from 48 to 35 cents, and that 35 cents, because of property value growth, has been able to sustain not only the existing debt, but the 2018 bond election and the 2023 bond election. So our INS rate is at 35, and you can see typically when you have a bond election, that tax rate goes up. And I will tell you, back in 2014, and Dan was here, we were projecting we were going to go all the way to 50 cents with that election. So it was a 5-cent increase for the 2014 bond election. It passed, but our values came in higher, and we only went up 3 cents, not the full 5. And so that's where this guessing game is. We're guessing on our property values, and then that's a good example. We were advertising a 5-cent increase, and it only ended up being 3. So the art of projections, and it is an art, not a science. So in the past, we could use trends. We were always at 10 to 14% for years, year over year. And so we would estimate 8% growth to be conservative. Then this little thing called pandemic came along, and now our values are all over the place. They went up to 30% increase. Then they dropped. This past year, we were at 4%. I've never seen property value growth of 4% in this district in recent history. So what are the influences there? New homes, multifamily, commercial, mortgage rates, and the overall economy is what's impacting us right now. Because mortgage rates have gotten so high, houses aren't selling as fast. Utilities is a big thing in this area. If you can't get water and wastewater, you can't build a home, right? And so there's so many things that go into this property value growth that it almost feels like you're throwing darts. So for the projections that we're giving you tonight, I want you to understand what these numbers are built on. So I went back to the demographic study because remember, she's talked to developers, she's talked to landowners. There is a page in there that projects how many new single-family homes will be occupied for the next 10 years. So I went and took that data. She also projects how many multifamily, age-restricted, manufactured home. I'm not using any of those. So I'm saying I'm just going to look at single-family homes to be conservative. Keep in mind, apartment complexes, 4 of those are our top 10 taxpayers. We have at least 4 coming into the community. 1 just opened. It wasn't on our 23 roll, so I'm not adding those values. So they're anywhere from 25 million to 45 million for 1 complex. We have 4 coming. Those aren't in these numbers. I'm not including an increase of how much your house is going to increase. I have no idea. Your house might be going down, it might stay steady. I'm not including any increase for that, and I'm not including a projection of any commercial. And I will tell you, driving up and down 290, I'm seeing a lot more bulldozers than I've seen in a while. I also went back and looked from our property value growth for the last several years, how much of that is made up of new property versus how much is that made up from existing. And so it's an interesting trend. You can see going back in 2019, new property was 46% of the total increase in values, but existing property, increasing those values was 54%. And that was the trend up until 23, and then look, it flipped. Then new property made up the largest percentage of the total value increase. All right, so using that methodology, because otherwise, when I asked Dan to run a model, he goes, okay, well, what's your property value growth going to look like? What's it going to look like, Galen? What's it going to look like, Tony? What's it going to look like, Cindy? So this is the only way I could come up with a scientific method. These are the projected households. The 591 was our average taxable value this summer. And so I said, okay, 770 homes times 591,000, that's adding 455 million to the tax roll. And from the previous year, that's 4.48%. So I'm going to use 4% for that year. So everything you see in yellow is what I gave Dan to base his models on. If property values for these 10 years grow more than that, guess what does that mean? More capacity, right? If they grow less, what does that mean? Less capacity. Also notice I did not increase the average taxable value. So that's another conservative built-in thing there. I'm not changing that. And typically, our average taxable value increases each year. So that's what we're using to do the projections that Mr. Wegmiller is doing.
So with all that wonderful data, we start building the bond capacity models. And what I will first touch on though is part of your bond capacity is your credit worthiness, just like buying a home or financing anything. And what I wanted to point out on this chart was the district is rated by 2 different bond rating agencies. And the important thing to note here is these ratings convey the credit worthiness and quality of the district to investors buying potentially 100 million in bonds or 200 million. So it's good feedback for the district, but this is their credit score, credit rating. And AA, AA2, as you can see, is near the top of the credit rating ladder. On top of this, the district pays $1,500 and gets a AAA rating from the state of Texas as a guarantee. So that when the bonds go in the market, they're about as good as anything that enters the market for highest credit quality, which means lowest interest rates that you'll get on borrowing money. The 4 factors that go into this is the green bars on the left. The economy, Central Texas economy is strong. The hill country, the Dripping Springs economy, we don't have Samsung, we don't have Tesla, we have a lot of rooftops. And social, they look at the socioeconomics of the area. So everything's really strong and positive throughout this region. But the growth is dependent upon residential primarily. So that's strong for the region. Here it recognizes the stress to the taxpayer. Financial performance, how the district manages its finances is strong. Management of the district is strong. Debt position, like most every district in the, especially growth areas, but across the state, you'll see debt levels in the state are high. The reason for that, cities, counties, schools, we had a road bond election with Hays County. Cities fund streets and different needs through bonding. Everything in Texas is done at the local level, so the local debt levels are high because they have to go to the local voters or come up with projects themselves here. So it's important to note that this rating is comparable across the country, California, New York, and everywhere in between. So AA tells someone buying bonds that Dripping Springs is on solid footing across the board. So that's good news for the district. Summary of the outstanding debt. The district has $233 million of callable debt with $319 right in the middle of outstanding principal. The reason that's so important is that $233 million in between each bond issue, if the district maintains a stable tax rate and collects additional revenue, has the ability to pay that debt off early. And they've been doing that year over year. You know, the first time we looked back was like 2012. They've been doing this year over year. So I'll go into some savings figures in a minute. But you can see the outstanding debt of the district on the right-hand side is somewhere between 1.9 and 5% interest rates. So pretty attractive interest rates for bonds that were issued over 25 to 30-year terms. And so the ability to call it or pay it off early is what callable, the callable column means. Means we're issuing bonds over 25, 30 years because it helps with capacity. But we also know that a prudently and well-run district will pay debt off early as they've demonstrated. Where are we at interest rate-wise? This is an index, and it goes from 1961 on the left to present day on the right. We put this in here just to show that we are still in really good terms of, or a good position of interest rates. That right-hand second box down shows since 1961, 79.04% of the time rates have been higher than what they are today. So it doesn't mean go borrow as much as you can, but know that if you're going to borrow money in this environment, it's a good time to access the market. we'd probably sell around 4% if we were selling 25 or 30-year bonds today. So back to the callable bonds and keeping watch on the opportunity to save money, because if we can refinance a piece of debt, just like refinancing a mortgage, one, it saves you interest costs as a district, but two, it helps with capacity. So this is just an example, 2012, 13, 14, 20, 22, 23, twice, the district took opportunities to either pay off debt completely or refinance it net of all costs and save over $36 million of interest costs on the existing debt. And you can't just go out and do this over and over again. There's restrictions on how often you do it. So most of these save 10% of the outstanding cost of the bonds by doing it each transaction. So we're saving real dollars each time. So the assumptions, and a lot of this is what Elaine just kind of went through, but these next two slides, just note that there are a lot of assumptions made which go into capacity. And so this is one slide of the figures, another slide of the assumptions that we're making, just so you have as a backdrop. We use some conservative interest rates, 50 basis points on the first issue out. But just know that we've seen in 60 days times interest rates go up 80 to 100 basis points. Those are some of the extreme situations, but we hope with conservatism on rates, conservatism on growth, that it allows you to issue all the bonds that get approved from time to time. This is, as Elaine mentioned, and I think the bottom left box is super important here. You know, there's always talk about the tax rate, bonds get approved, how much can we either keep the rate where it's at, can we lower the rate? If you look at 2024 to 2025, we went from 11% to 4.3%. And in those two levels, 11 to 4.3, if we had lowered the rate between 23 and 24, 23 was 30% growth. If we had lowered the rate for a couple of years and everyone believed, well, it's at least going to be 15 or 18 or 12%, we would have created a real bind. So the idea is always looking forward to what exactly, this isn't a one snapshot operation when we look at bonding capacity, because, you know, depending on when the kids come, when you need facilities, this is a real driver to how we get to where we're going. What is the debt capacity without increasing the INS tax rate at 35 cents? Model 2 is, what does the tax rate look like at $500 million of bond capacity request? Model 3 is, what is the additional capacity with 1 cent? So I'm promising I'm not going to go even a cell by cell in this, but this is the complexity of the model that we use, and it digs into paying off debt, it digs into the annual growth increases, and it utilizes fund balance in an appropriate way, debt service fund balance, to keep and manage the debt. But this is one scenario. This is the second scenario that you have. And I'm going fast because I'll get to the bottom line, which is what we really want to see. Out of those three questions, no increase, 1 cent increase, and what's it take to get to 500 million? These models are what tell us how we get there. And it's the summary of this is, at 35 cents, the district has about 460 million worth of capacity today. Model 2 that I skipped through, the end of the story at the end of that is it's 500 million. To get to 500 million is basically 1.3 cents on the tax rate. And then the 1 cent scenario is 490 million of capacity. So you see 1 cent gets you about 30 million of capacity that we're looking at here. So that's kind of, how we look at it. What's important to note is 20 years ago, capacity was like 40 million, and then the district grew, and then it grew by another 50, 60 million in capacity. These numbers, and some of you that have been on prior committees have seen these numbers keep growing because the values and interest rates stay where they are. Yes, ma'am.
So then I thought, okay, well, people are gonna wanna know, what is the impact of the 1 cent or the 500 million that requires a 1.3 cent increase on the tax rate? So just modeling 4 different homes, because all of our homes are valued differently. If you have a $500,000 home, taxable value, and this is just the interest and sinking portion of the tax rate, so just modeling that, at 35 cents, your property taxes would be $1,750 a year. If we increase the 35 cents to 36 cents, that increases the property tax bill to $1,800, which is $50 a year. Following that same logic, you have an $850,000 home, a $1.2 million home, and a $2 million home. So a 1 cent increase on the INS tax rate for a $2 million home is $200 a year. Then the other model that was run, what does the tax rate look like with a $500 million bond? So that pushed the tax rate to 36.3 cents. And so that is an increase of $65 a year, all the way up to $260 a year. So just to give you some ideas, I'm not telling you you are putting together a $500 million bond. I'm not telling you you're even putting together 460. Just those are our capacities. Trust me, I gave Dan probably 10 scenarios before we got to this, and his poor guy was probably like, stop already. I can do this 1,000 times. So those were the 3 questions we asked. To follow up on some other information, this was in the parking lot, and I don't think I had it in your response. What does it cost to conduct an election? So I had 60 to 80,000 in my head, and that is from November of 22. So what these costs represent is we contract with the county to run the election. They set up the sites, they have the voting machines, they hire the people. We are required by law to post very large notices in the newspaper. That costs a little bit. We send out mailers and we put up signs because we want people to know we're having a bond election. Remember, we can't advocate for or against, but we do put out factual information. And then the May election costs that you see here are board elections. And so when you add a bond election, if you compare May of 22 to May of 23, you can see the cost did go up because in May of 23 we added a bond election, and so that usually has more sites, which means more workers. And so someone had asked for the cost of election, and that's what this is. I asked about November of 20. I was like, you didn't have a bond in November of 20. Why did we have an election? That was the COVID year, and the May elections were pushed to November. So I was like, that sticks out weird. Then we're not going to cover this for sake of time, but Dan has provided what the law says as far as bond elections and special propositions. You've got that in your packet. You can read it. When it comes down to how many propositions we have to work with our bond counsel and legal. They're going to go through all of the projects, make sure if anything needs to be on a special proposition, and then the board will follow that guidance. But we do have this information in here for reference. All right, we got through all of it.
Okay, so let's take some time. It's a lot of information. We sat there an hour. Take some time at your tabletop. Jan and Elaine are going to circulate in the room and just have some good conversation. I'll let you know when we have about a 2-minute warning. Start questions, okay?
About 12 minutes of conversation, and we want to make sure that we get to our vote, because I know that's what everybody's anticipating tonight. So we're going to do our Q&A, and table facilitators, make sure you use your microphone. And Maureen, do you have a microphone? Yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to wait till everybody's ready so everybody can hear the question. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, Maureen, I want you to ask the first question.
Okay, we had a lot of really good conversations, but how many questions am I allowed to ask? One, okay, sorry. Just one, sorry. I thought so, but,
We're gonna answer more questions during the vote, so
Okay.
ask the one that's.
okay, so the spreadsheet has all of the priorities, and they're ranked 1, 2, and 3. How were those priorities determined by 1, 2, and 3?
Okay, I'm
Can I ask
good.
this first real quick? Do you have a finance question by chance, or something about what we just discussed? Why don't we ask that, and then we can come back to that in the pages?
Okay. I don't know if this qualifies either, but I'll ask. How, or have there been any discussions about alternative revenue resources?
That's a good one.
Can you talk to me more about alternative revenue resources?
Ways to bring in money, and I think we touched on it just a little bit when we were talking about like Jumbotron advertising, or
So there was a budget collaboration committee studying the operations side of life, and their goal was to make recommendations to increase revenues or decrease expenditures. In their last meeting, they recommended several revenue enhancements. Those are all on the operations side. So things like raising pre-K tuition, charging to park in the parking lot at Mercer, at Founder's Day. Help me out, Gina, I've gone for a blank. There were several revenue enhancements. Those are all operations. You don't put that money into INS. So for INS purposes, we have a little bit of money left from the 2018 bond. And remember, in the 23 bond, the board chose to take some things out of bond and fund them through operations. That's really putting a strain over there. That's why I've put all these vehicles back on the table. But you've got general fund balance that's going down, and you've got a little bit left from 18. We're not far enough along in 23 bond to know if we have savings there. We do have interest. We've already made $3 million in interest, so that's a help. But for INS purposes, you don't have a lot of different revenue sources.
We'll come back to that other question, okay? All right, Cindy.
I think our questions were answered.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, so I have a question. If we've done any kind of public polling on what the community supports as far as bonds every year, bond every other year, is there any?
We have
idea or
not.
taste?
We are talking to a survey company that does that helped us with the 23 bond. So that will probably be something that we do, but this is the first step.
Okay. I'm not sure if I understand the question I wrote down, so y'all can correct me.
You go, you're fine.
In the 3 models, like on these spreadsheets,
3 scenarios.
the 3 scenarios, what is the difference projected total issuance versus the number that's circled at the top?
So those models assume that we have authorizations from the 23 bond election for $223.7 million. That's how much we're authorized to issue. We have sold 100 million of that authorization. We have 123.7 left. These models assume we sell all of that. And then either 460 million, or 500, or 490 million. So is that what you're asking?
Perfect, good job.
So the total is the total bond capacity that we have, right? The bottom number that's not circled?
Bottom number that's not circled. Can you give me a number?
Like on model 2, it says projected total issuance.
The number at the, yes, that's the total.
Okay.
Okay, Galen.
I don't think we have anything. I think we got most of ours answered.
Okay.
All right, fantastic. We are going to continue to answer questions, but if I don't give you enough time to have these conversations about your voting tonight, you will pitchfork me out in the parking lot, okay? So we're gonna go around, as you have more questions tonight, raise your hand, we'll come over. We're gonna pass out your sheets. You have brand new sheets tonight. Bring out the ones you worked on, because that was your homework. And we wanna make sure you have a reference point. We brought you a brand new clean one that you can use tonight to keep tally of the vote tonight. Now, please understand that your table facilitators are going to lead you in this vote. That doesn't mean there's one way to do this, that we only use one way. If your table wants to start with the 1s, 2s, and 3s, or 1s, or the 2s, or the 3s, if you want to start with a certain campus first, if you want to turn the paper over to the very bottom and go up, you can. Go from the top down. There's no right or wrong way, right? It's how your table's comfortable. But I have instructed the facilitators that if y'all get stuck on a project, move on. Go on to the next one, and you can always come back. Now, it is 7:12. At 8 o'clock, we are done in this room, okay? We're not staying past that time. If your table's not finished, we will just say thank you, and we will finish up the night. But I don't see why there's any reason why you shouldn't be able to finish by 8 o'clock, okay? So everybody has their sheet. Please note, our percentage is a 2/3 passing. Your table facilitator has that formula chart, so you can see what that is based on the amount of people at your table, and they'll let you know that as well. So like I said, we're gonna circulate, answer questions, help you in any way we can. We want you to work collaboratively. If 2 tables finish before 8, I like for y'all to go tell the other table what you did, and y'all share so you can talk in the room tonight. So we'll see if we get finished by then that we've got some time to do that as well. Okay, go ahead and get started.
That's me, that's all me, that's nobody else but me. I looked at campuses that we have to have sooner than later as a priority one. Are all the new campuses a priority one? Yes. Can we afford all the new campuses? No. So the ones that are further down, I put a 2, I think. The vehicles, the equipment, I prioritized by year of need. So if it's a 25, a 26, I don't want to do fund balance, so I put it a 1. If it's 28, 29, it's a 3. So the priorities are based on year of need, really. All of this stuff is a priority, but I know we can't do it all. So that's where the numbers come from. It doesn't mean that this campus is more important than that campus. It's just, what is the most urgent? Does that help?
Doesn't mean 3s can't make it in 2.
Right.
That,
If there's a 3 on there that you're very passionate about, put it on there.
all right, get to voting, get to talking.
And I will tell you, I went and put all the priority ones and came up with, I think, 516 million. So that's more than 460, that's all I can tell you.
All right.